Today's crazy teacher story is about stone walls. And have you ever thought about stone walls in any way other than they're just a wall? Well, hopefully after this story, you'll think about stone walls in a whole different way. Estabrook Woods is full of stone walls. And what were these stone walls used for, do you think? Do you think that you can actually tell how long these rocks have been here? And who knows what these rocks have seen? So sit back and listen to our story about stone walls from the crazy teacher. Well, once upon a time there was a group of Englishmen looking for riches in a new world. The first New World settlement was Jamestown in 1607. John Smith's group then attempted to settle in New England, calling this settlement the North Virginia Company. However, this was a lousy place to settle. The winters were horrible, the soil was rocky, and the coastline consisted of cliffs and ledges. They abandoned this settlement in less than a year. When the Pilgrims arrived in 1620, they found the soil somewhat less rocky than the coast of Maine, and the winters a tad less horrible. It was a hard first winter, but they survived and stuck it out. The third group to migrate from England was the Puritans. They chose the land around what we now call Boston. This was the ideal place. The terrain was far better than both Maine and Plymouth. There were wide rivers, broad salt marshes, fertile soil, moderate winters. It enabled the Massachusetts Bay Colony to be extremely successful. This part of New England felt like their old England. And it was like their old England because geologically the Old World and the New World was formed as part of the same mountain range of the supercontinent Pangea. New England, the eastern coast of Canada, and Britain were pressed tightly together during this time. The Acadian Mountains became what we know today to be the Northern Appalachian Mountains. The stones we see today were created during that time frame. Hi, I'm here in Rockport at a beach called Pebble Beach. You can probably guess why it's called Pebble Beach. The sand here is very rocky and stony. Rocks come from all different places. These rocks have probably been washed and made a lot smoother by the tides. You can see lots and lots of different rocks here at Pebble Beach. About 200 million years ago, Old England and New England parted company. New England lies in the middle of the North American plate. England lies in the middle of the European plate. While not typical, these two areas can be prone to earthquakes. In fact, William Bradford in 1638 spoke of a powerful one. Now here's this kind of random big boulder sitting out in the middle of nowhere. Probably a remnant from the Ice Age. The early settlers used stone for fireplaces, buildings, foundations, and pathways, like this foundation in Estabrook Woods. Unfortunately, another thing that the settlers used stone for was for gravestones. Many children died very young during this particular time frame. So, back to stone walls. A lot of people associate stone walls with our country's early history. However, in the early years of this country's settlement, this was not true. Early settlers tended to plant their crops in stone-free coastal plains and river valleys. This land at the time was shared. No one owned plots, and it was the first community garden of sorts. There was no way that anyone wanted to venture up into the forested uplands where the natives lived, so they shared the land, and there was really no need to partition off spaces. If there was any fencing, it was made from wood. Many of the areas that were initially settled were in areas near the coast and estuaries, and the soil here did not contain a large amount of stones. Where you might find a lot of stones in the upland river areas were not areas they wanted to venture to, so these early Puritan colonies were social colonies. While there were fences in these communities, they were not designed to separate people. Rather, they were used to protect vegetables from roaming livestock like cows and pigs. After about 100 years of warring with the natives in King Philip's War, the Puritans started to move out to what's called now the burbs, and then they started to separate land into more properties. They would use slashes on trees or cairns to mark where their property was, and then the stone wall came into fashion.
Here we are still at Estabrook, and we have stumbled upon, finally after walking for a while, this is a way that the early colonists used stone. They used it for foundations, and this right here is a pit of somebody's house. It was built with stone, which is very cool. And while there are stone walls around each person's place, stone walls weren't used to fence off properties till later in the 1700s, and after the Revolutionary War was the biggest time when a lot of stone walls were actually made, because they were clearing fields and they needed to get rid of the stones. So anyway, Estabrook Woods, a really cool spot to come and check out rocks, how they tell history, how they tell geology, and how they tell you about what lives here.
Between 1776 and 1825, millions of stone walls were built in New England. Farmers returned home. There were freed slaves, debtors, injured soldiers, and other unemployed people, which were put to work to build stone walls. All of these rocks came from a change in New England's soil. The forests were now gone, and with exposure to the elements, you can find them easily. If stone walls could talk, what would they say? What have they seen throughout time? A lot of stone walls in Concord witnessed the beginning of the Revolutionary War. The Emerson family witnessed the start of the hostilities between the British regulars and the Minutemen right near this wall. And the stone walls that lay along the Battle Road also witnessed the start of the Revolutionary War on April 19, 1775.
Chipmunks are one of the largest inhabitants of stone wall houses. Here we have little chipmunk out eating his breakfast, and not so happy about seeing Crazy Teacher with camera, and off he will be skittering. Stone walls are also homes to many different types of amphibian life, such as frogs and toads, as this guy probably is going to go hopping back to his stone wall in a minute. Maybe not. And stone walls also host a lot of plant life. You can see here that this tree is growing out from the stone wall, and they have lots of mosses that like to live on them. And ferns are another type of plant that you will often find near a stone wall. And here we have a nice dog who has come to greet us as we look at stone walls. Another type of thing that likes to live on top of stone walls is lichens. Lichen is a combination of algae and fungi. Now it's your turn to tell your own stone wall story. What have your rocks seen? Who lives there? What other secrets do they have to tell? Have fun. Looking forward to see what you can do.